The category one, which is that just looking buyer. And this is the one that definitely had the buyer that hasn't decided to make a change. So it's the company that hasn't decided to leave their current sales training company, or hasn't decided to even train their people at all, or it would be just yesterday I was working with a customer that it's a law firm, and so for them, their category one buyers they haven't decided that they're going to not use ChatGPT and Google to figure out all their legal advice, that they're actually going to outsource their legal advice, that they're going to do something different in order to figure out their contracts. So
interesting.
So this is a category one type buyer. What's interesting though, right, is that the common phrase that everyone says is, I'm just looking, or I'm just checking things out, or I'm just getting information. So that's what a person says. But what we're saying is a true just looking buyer is someone that hasn't decided to make a change.
Correct. And so with the legal example, if a company also was already employing a legal team and weren't sure they were going to leave that legal team, they're also a category one. So it's whether it's ChatGPT and Google or an actual legal team, if they're still considering their current legal team or Google, they're still category one, because there's still an option to not make a change at all.
There's still an option to not make a change at all. Now, what's interesting is a lot of salespeople will hear that and say, "Well, that's not. I don't want to waste time with those type of buyers." Mm-hmm. Well, the problem is you're going to be a salesperson with skinny kids, which what the great Zig Ziglar would say is that you want to make lots of money so you can feed your kids very well. You don't want to have skinny kids as a salesperson. So I don't know if we could say that in this time period, but maybe we can. I don't know. But the concept here though is if you can help these people, if you can help the customer, one is a salesperson, if you can understand the category the buyer is in, then you can actually speed up time. But most salespeople, because they're relying on, I need buyers that are ready, willing, and able. I need buyers that are further in the process. I need buyers, you can give me a buyer marketing that has definitely decided they're going to do something, and they're definitely, qualified, they're definitely interested, then I can close all of those.
Of course you can. Of course you can. Just ask Apple.
Yeah, of course
you can. Of course you can.
But that's not what what sales is, and that's not why we need salespeople making several $100,000s a year. Because if that's all it was, then you would just have a salary-based person that would answer questions,
or a kiosk with an iPad.
Yeah, kiosk and iPad, and exactly.
You wouldn't exist.
Right. You'd be making $16 an hour at Apple, helping them buy phones and watches, right? So the first category is that category one buyer, and again, it's that true just looking buyer. So what that also says is it's possible a customer could say they're just looking, but they're actually further along in the process.
Correct.
So I'd be careful with that.
Correct.
Okay, so we'll talk about that probably a little bit later to figure that out. That second category buyer, that category two buyer, we're calling them an overwhelmed buyer. So now why do we call them an overwhelmed buyer?
Well, what's interesting is that we think sometimes when I go into my sales mindset, that when somebody says yes to you, that then I'm definitely leaving this, that's when things get easy, and it is not. I mean, every yes opens up so many more questions. So if I decide that I am going to leave, we'll use the legal one. I'm going to leave who's currently handling all of our legal side of our business. Well, now, the sky's the limit. I've got to figure out, okay, well, do I decide to keep more of that money and go back to Google or ChatGPT? Do I go and find a friend who's a lawyer and ask them to do things? Do I find a big company? Do I find a small company? Do I do it in a fractional service? Do I have a full-time person? I mean, there's so many more questions that open up. Same with buying a home. I decide, okay, I'm leaving my current home, and that only opens up a million more places of where in the world am I going to live? And then once I pick a state and a city, what part of town do I live in? And then what type of home do I buy? Do I get a resale home in an established neighborhood, or do I buy in a new community that's coming up? Or maybe I go in and rent for a while to figure it out. So renting's now on the an option for me. And do I keep with my same aesthetic of with the furniture that I've had in the past, or do I go more modern or more traditional, or do I buy a home that I can live in for the rest of my life that maybe has, is built to age in place and zero threshold? Or do I buy something that's large and has stairs and is very vertical? What direction do I go? So saying I'm leaving my house only opens up like 10,000 more questions. So I'm overwhelmed. So there's the overwhelm.
Yeah, that's why we call them an overwhelmed buyer. And I love what you just said, because I 100% agree with that a lot of salespeople feel like it's like downhill once a customer becomes a category 2, once they've decided to make a change, and you're not going downhill. You're just now starting a new hill. There's just a new hill that you need to now conquer, a new mountain you need to conquer that is just a different. It's just a different mountain.
Exactly.
I wouldn't necessarily say one is easier than the other or one is harder than the other. It's just completely different. And it takes a different strategy. So that's a category 2. So category 1 is that just looking, haven't decided to make a change. So obviously our goal is to convince them that they should make a change and they are unhappy with what they have and they should leave what they have. Then a category 2 is that overwhelmed. So now they definitely are going to do something, but they're overwhelmed with all of these options, the price level, the service level, just all kinds of factors that come into play, right? And so obviously our goal with them is we need to narrow it down for them. We need to make the 10,000 decisions they're about to make. We need to make them a lot simpler, and we need to create some sort of hierarchy of criteria that we would say in NLP to figure out, what's the most important decisions, and then we'll kind of go from there to kind of narrow things down. And then that leads us to the final category, the category 3, and that's the torn buyer. So they're torn between what?
You and somebody else. This is the fun one. And this is where I think most salespeople, when you go to your traditional sales training that your company hosts when you're brand new, they usually give you some information on here is our competitive analysis against who else is in the market. And they want their teams and their sales professionals to know who else are people looking at. They bring up this name. What does that mean? And why are we better than everyone in the competition? And so it is that very end hand-to-hand combat. It's me versus somebody else. Who's going to win? And people are really good at this. But most of our buyers aren't coming in at this space. That's the tricky part there.
That is the tricky part, yeah. And so a salesperson needs to be very flexible. One of our beliefs is the most flexible element in any system controls that system. And so they need to be flexible in the sense that the buyer in front of me is a category 3. And so with a category 3, my job is I need to get them to achieve resolution and force a compromise. That there's no such thing as a perfect offering. So what I am offering has pros and cons based on the service, based on the quality, based on the price that I'm charging, and our competition has a different offering that they're going to have to compromise on based upon the price, based upon the speed, based upon the quality, based upon the service. These are all just that's it, right? So but step 1 though is I need to be very kind of grateful that this is the buyer that I have at this moment, and they're a category 3, and I need to be flexible on focusing on the decisions that customer needs to make versus the category 2 now all of a sudden, and that's a different experience versus a category 1, and that's a different experience.
Right, and we don't know what pitch and what experience to give them if we don't know what category they're in. And you said earlier, a lot of them, almost everybody comes in saying, I'm just looking. And I think very quickly, though, after that, what I've seen and what I've heard from so many salespeople is then after the just looking, the conversation changes to be really category 3 language of, I'm also looking at such and such and I really like them. And so it's between the two of you. You two are my favorite. But if we haven't categorized, a lot of times there's that hidden other competitor, which is what they're really doing, what they're doing right now. That jumps in. So I think just the same as they all say just looking, and they may be category 1, but they might be category 2 or 3. They all then change to not all, but most people will change to a category 3 language pattern, leading the salesperson to think like, we're right here. I'm so close. Like I've got all these hot leads. I've got all these hot ones that are getting ready to close. But if we haven't really categorized them, a lot of times they still are category 1. They're just speaking a very sneaky category 3 language.
That's right. And we have to be careful with that because like on the business to business side, so in the business to consumer side, you'll probably hear language like I'm just looking or I'm just browsing or those kind of things are probably what people would say, right? But in the business to business side, it's I'm interested in your price. So I'm interested in what you like. We're a recruiting company, so we hear a lot of people will say, so I'm interested in what you're charging for a sales recruit, or my boss or my CEO wanted me to schedule a meeting with you to get some more information to bring back to them.
Mm-hmm.
So
doing my due diligence.
So, but we got to be careful with that because they're speaking the language. Like in that case, they're speaking the language of a category 3 buyer because they're wanting to talk about the price and they're wanting, or at least a category 2, but so if they're talking about, I need some information, we could immediately take that and we could start selling them on category 3 decisions or category 2 decisions, but they haven't even decided yet if they're actually going to outsource their sales recruiting to a company like us or whomever else they're talking to.
Right. Well, and what's important is figuring out the role of the person that's talking to you on the business to business side. Are they going to be the one that's implementing? Are they the one who is for keeping it or not keeping it? So on the business side, there's a lot of strategy there as well you can play with.
There is.